Ladies and gentlemen, if we can have your attention, we're going to get started. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Meredith King, and this is Francisco Sebal. And as two of the 7 members of the executive team of the Education Club here at the Yale School of Management, we'd like to be the first to welcome you to the 2011 Education Leadership Conference. This year's conference had unprecedented demand, and we are excited to be able to welcome over 650 people in this room today. 7 out of 10 of you are professionals, while 3 out of 10 are students, and we have over 30 Yale SOM alumni with us, and another 30 current teachers with us. Over 70 of you are school or district administrators, and over 200 of you are from nonprofit education organizations. But regardless of who you are or where you're coming from, 100% of you represent the education reform movement as it stands right now. That does deserve applause. And we're excited because the diversity of your experiences and the wealth of your knowledge will undoubtedly enhance the discussions that we'll have today. But before we begin, of course, we'd like to thank all of the people who have made this day possible, starting with our sponsors. Travelers, the Charter Oak Challenge Foundation, ConCan, the Parthenon Group, New Schools Venture Fund, Wireless Generation, Uncommon Schools, Harlem Village Academies, Will Hines, Blake Drexler, and Gary Holloway. We'd also like to thank 2 of our treasured Education Club advisors, Alex Johnston of ConCan and Ken Paul of Achievement First. Alex and Ken, as well as Jen Alexander of ConCan, have been invaluable sounding boards for us throughout this entire conference planning process. And finally, we'd like to acknowledge the members of the SOM Education Club and the Project for Law and Education at the Yale Law School. All of them have put in countless hours throughout the year to make this conference a reality. Without the help of our sponsors, advisors, and volunteers, this conference would not be possible. So can we take a moment and just give all of those people a great big round of applause?
Thank you, Meredith. 1 in 8 students at the Yale School of Management is actively involved in the Education Club, an incredible number for a business school. We're proud to say that of last year's organizers, 5 of 6 are with us today, and all 6 are currently working in education reform. The strength and growth of our school's Education Club can be traced in large part to one person, who I have the great honor of introducing. We are fortunate to be at a business school with a dean who teaches a human capital case about a school in Botswana to all first-year students, or who lectures about the founding of Amistad Academy in her nonprofit management class. 5 years ago, she supported a group of students who wanted to start a conference about education reform here. Dean Oster, we wouldn't be standing here without you, and we cannot thank you enough for your continued interest in education reform and your continued support of the Education Club. Please join me in welcoming the Yale School of Management's Dean, Sharon Oster.
Thank you, Francisco, and thank you all of you for coming. I guess I'm using this instead. This is quite an occasion, and again, I want to welcome you on behalf of the School of Management. I always feel a little bit like a charlatan when I welcome you on behalf of the School of Management, because this really is an effort done by our students. And I just get plaudits, and the school gets renowned for having this conference, and it is really, and has been from the beginning, entirely done by the students. So I want to begin by thanking the students for their efforts in this year, which is again a spectacular event, and just call out Greg Rawson and Lydia Gersheimer, who are the 2 heads of the of this conference this year, but there are many, many more, as we've heard from Francisco and Meredith, who've been responsible for this. As I was thinking about this conference, I reflected back on 5 years ago when this started, and thought a little bit about what the subject of the conference has been in the past and where we are today in terms of subject matter. And I think it reflects something of what's happening in the educational reform area in general. When we began this conference, a lot of the discussion, as was, I think, true in educational reform in general, had to do with the question of why. Is education really broken? Is there really an achievement gap? Maybe more importantly, is there anything we can really do about an achievement gap? Does educational reform really matter to our country's growth and to what we're doing? Those were questions, believe it or not, that 5 years ago people had some doubts about. It seems to me the only people that have doubts about those questions now are some of the people in our state legislature. But we're working hard to educate them as well. I think the second line of question as we look in the last few years that we began to make some progress on is the question, if we answered why, the next question was what? What did we mean by educational reform? What were going to be the ingredients in educational reform? And I think we've actually made some good progress in that area as well. It's hard to come to a conference or a meeting on educational reform and not hear the words effectiveness, outcomes, data, and measurement. As a social scientist, it does my heart good to find all of my students so interested in statistics these days. And I think that has something to do with the fact that we all understand that a component of getting educational reform right is going to be figuring out what the kids are learning and how to get them to learn more. But the last question, I would say, and the question of today's conference is the how. Those of you that were at Governor Markell's excellent speech last night and listened to the Q&A, it was clear that the question of how do we do this? How do we accomplish something we all know we need to accomplish? And we even, some of us have some sense of how to accomplish. How do we get all of the players that matter to do what needs to be done to bring educational reform to all the places in this country? And I think we all know that a good part of the how is going to be leadership. And it is in that context especially my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Mike Johnston, who today is doing the leadership part both himself and has in his past and in his current helped to create new leaders. Mike is currently a state senator from Colorado representing the Northeast Denver area. Many of you know him and hopefully voting all the right way in Colorado. But many of you know him from his past in New Leaders for New Schools, a work that he founded to bring creative new leaders to our urban high schools to the principalship. He himself has been in the trenches teaching, as well as in the nonprofit area, as well as now in the public area. He is one of Yale's own, Yale College graduate, Yale Law School graduate. He had to take a little detour to Harvard to the ed school, because Yale has no ed school. But we are very delighted now to welcome back our own Mike Johnston. Please join me.